From the Grit Institute, this is the Grit Factor podcast. And I'm Shannon Huffman-Coulson, former Apache helicopter pilot, speaker, and author of The Grit Factor, Courage, Resilience, and Leadership in the most male-dominated organization in the world. I'm also the founder of the Grit Institute, where I help purpose-driven leaders like you build grit and resilience and connect with purpose so that you can navigate transitions, overcome challenges, and lead with impact in your work for a better world. My guest today is Jim Weber. And if you've ever laced up a pair of running shoes, you've probably heard of Brooks Running, the company that Jim transformed from the brink of bankruptcy to one of the most respected brands in the sports industry. Under Jim's leadership, Brooks was so successful that Warren Buffett himself chose to break it out as a standalone business within Berkshire Hathaway, an extraordinary testament to the power of a purpose-driven culture. But Jim's story is more than a case study in corporate turnaround. It's also profoundly personal. In Running with Purpose, Jim shares not only how he reshaped a business, but how he navigated extraordinary challenges in his own life, including a diagnosis of cancer that could have stopped him in his tracks. In our conversation today, we'll explore how Jim built Brooks around what he calls the soul of a runner, why purpose is the ultimate competitive advantage, and how grit, optimism, and values-driven decision-making helped him weather both market turbulence and personal trials. Wherever you're listening from, prepare for an inspiring and deeply human conversation about leading with heart and purpose and running toward the challenges that matter the most. Let's take off. Thank you so much. Thanks for your flexibility. I appreciate it.
Not a worry.
And it's great to see you again.
Good to see you, Shannon. This is going to be fun. We'll make it fun.
Just finished rereading your book and have just talked about it again, of course, with my husband, and all of us are Tuck graduates. So I love that connection, and I love the Seattle connection. And, I was a runner before having knee problems, and my husband has taken up running since. I'm not quite sure what that means, but we're big fans of everything it is that you do. So thank you for all of your work in the world.
Thank you. It's been a great journey. I feel fortunate. I feel grateful. And experiences are what make life what it is, which is you've got to experience every moment along the way. And I've tried to do that, Shannon.
Yes. Well, that's definitely evident. I was struck by, you've talked several times about growing up in Minnesota as part of a big family, maybe not always an easy family to be a part of, and that's true for many people. But you found an outlet getting outside and doing something a little different than running. Can you talk about that and how that has shaped you?
Yeah, I think, we could all write a book on our families, right? That's not unique. And I was the fourth of 6 children in 8 years. So the house was busy and chaotic, and sort of being in the middle, I almost felt a little bit lost. But early on, everyone in Minnesota was playing hockey. You literally started at 5 years old on the rinks. We had ponds and rinks near our house. And of course, everybody was skating. And I just decided I'm going to get good at this. I loved it. It's such a great game. And I put everything I had into it. So I played all through little leagues in high school and a little bit of college. Right. But it's kind of what you did in Minnesota growing up there. It was fun.
Sure. And I love that all through your book, you talk about yourself as a once hockey player. So that never left you, it seems, even as you got into your running careers, both in business and personally.
I think team sports are amazing, right? And I'm obviously spent most of my career in the running business in sporting goods, but team sports build so many skill sets, right? How to win, how to lose, how to be part of a team. I loved it. And, as I progressed through the years, I became not the best player the further on I went, right? But I think I was a good teammate, and I just loved the whole team dynamic. So there's so many lessons that come from that.
Yes.
And, oftentimes I'm a little bit older now, Shannon, but, oftentimes your mental age is not exactly your physical age, and sort of like your identity too. I think I was a scrappy hockey player, and and hustling with grit to try and, pull the puck out and make a play, and hopefully we get a shot and score a goal. So that whole dynamic in hockey is, I have taken that into my business sort of style and approach, where there's a relentlessness to it. And because I think, you don't always, it's not always up and to the right. You're going to meet challenges and the like. And I think hockey, that happens every 10 seconds.
It's a good training ground for sure, or a good training rink, as it may be. That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, the challenges that you've faced even prior to Brooks are fantastic, and were amazing training for you as well. It's pretty clear, but maybe because we have limited time, we could jump into, you were on the board of Brooks. It's really on fumes, and things are really, really tenuous. I think it's hard to describe just how scary that can feel, but I'd love you to try. And then the work that you did to take a bet on that, and to take over, and how it is that you could move forward from a position that was really, really a scary place.
Yeah. So it starts a little bit before that, in the sense that I really wanted to run a company.
Yeah.
I wanted the wheel. I wanted to be president of a company. I wanted to be an enterprise leader. And so my first opportunities were not fabulously healthy businesses. They were all turnarounds.
Sure.
And so I'd been through, several divisions of Coleman that I'd run that were all kind of turnarounds and repositionings of the brands in the marketplace. So Brooks was an amazing story. Athletic footwear and apparel is huge, right? From brands like Nike and on down. And the company had moved to Seattle in the 90s, and an executive came out of Nike, Helen Rocky, and she literally saved the company in the 90s. But she went on for another opportunity, and there were several CEOs through, and the company got sideways a little bit and got into trouble again. So when I walked in, a private equity owner had bought it. There was a lot of debt on the company. It was losing several $1 million. It's had some strategies to enter new categories and new channels and distribution that had not been successful. Right. So there was a lot of inventory. And, so as a board member, this is the kind of board where there's Friday morning meetings by phone because the bank doesn't want to fund payroll that's due that day. So you have these, and when a company gets into crises, financial crises, the board gets pretty active. So we were having these calls, and the company was just struggling in a lot of fronts, and wasn't healthy. So after looking at it closely for a couple months, the board asked me to come in and be the fourth CEO in 2 years. And I had been in turnarounds before, but I was pretty excited about the category, and we saw a path for Brooks to be profitable and get back on its feet. And that was the beginning.
Wow. You talk about, and what I also love is how you show this in your book, and which I hope that everybody will pick up and read if they haven't already, but that you are really showing the evolution of your own leadership, which I really appreciate, because it is something that has to evolve, isn't it, over time and with experience?
Well, I think if you want to be successful, as things change and the organization grows, I had to evolve as a leader. Sure. And, and I think the smartest people that I've been around, and the leaders that I've admired the most, the piece that just comes, screaming at me is their curiosity. They're lifelong learners, right? And so it became clear. We used to sit down with my chief of staff almost every year and say, okay, the company's evolving, we're growing. How do I need to evolve the way I play my role as CEO? How do we need to evolve the way we lead and run the company? And we started at around 60 million in revenue. It was completely different at 200. It was completely different at 500. And we had some issues and scaling issues at 700-800 million to get to $1 billion. It was completely different. So yeah, Shannon, I think that I found that I had to completely evolve the way I led and the role I played in the company, the way decisions were made, the way we communicated, the way we built out the organization and led people. Everybody's role evolves, right? So we went from a very small company last year, Brooks did right about $1.4 billion, and they're really working hard right now on how to structure themselves to be successful at $2 billion. Every phase, leadership changed dramatically.
That's I'm looking actually for the quote in your book right now, but you really were willing to um you were willing to challenge the standard way of doing things, which is not an easy thing to do. And one of the other pieces that really stands out as incredibly gritty, if you don't mind my using that word, but also visionary and also risky, was your decision to make this focus on the high end of running
Yep.
shoes and to scrap everything else. And I remember you described this in your book, and not everybody was going along with that. Not your suppliers, not your distributors, not the people that you were partnering with. Can you talk about how you maybe came to that decision, but also
Yep.
how you get through that point of feeling like, you know what, this is not going to necessarily be a popular decision. People aren't going to understand it, but I know that's the path forward.
Yeah. There's a lot of pieces, to that picture for me that are so important. If you're not the dominant platform player in your category,
Yeah,
you're a challenger brand. And there's so many more challenger brands than there are a dominant platform company or two, maybe. So
sure.
I start with that. And the biggest risk you could take is looking like your bigger competitor.
Right.
I've always believed you have to understand them, you have to know them well, partly because you want to understand their appeal to the customer, because you have to find white space to be relevant to the customer. And for me, it was always about finding segments where you could win the
Right.
customer and create repeatability and loyalty and credibility, right?
Sure.
Authenticity. So by the time I got to Brooks, I'd understood that. And I was looking for a place for Brooks to be successful and create repeatable success and ultimately loyal customers.
Sure.
And they had two shoes in performance running, the Beast and the Addiction, that every retailer had to carry because they were shoes that were fit for purpose for certain types of runners.
Sure.
And so we started with that. And those were the only shoes that had margin and that were repeatable. So the key to the whole strategy was the Adrenaline GTS. It was a mid-price stability shoe that's an everyday trainer.
Right.
And the everyday training business is the core of the running category. So we saw, that a frequent runner, maybe 10, 15, 20 miles a week, the shoe really mattered. It was about fit, feel, and ride. It wasn't about technology and visible technology. And at the time, it was air, it was shocks, it was gel. We didn't
Right.
have any of that. We didn't have any of that. So we really went for runability,
Yeah.
mile after mile, going after that frequent runner. And the mid-price stability shoe was it. And that got perfected in the Adrenaline by a fantastic team of people. Their fingerprints are still on this shoe. And the Adrenaline was sort of perfected in fit, feel, and ride in 2002. Today
Sure.
it's a 5 million pair shoe. It's the number one stability trainer in the world.
That's
And
amazing.
so, I think that's where my conviction came from. We didn't have a lot of choices. And what was interesting, Shannon, is the industries create this, right? There's a conventional wisdom of how you succeed. And it's usually based on the business model of the leader.
Sure.
And so, again, back to my point is sometimes the riskiest strategy is to mirror the
Right.
strongest competitor in the category, because they're gonna do what they do better than you. So yeah, it's better to do something different. And that was the genesis of it. But I had some struggles and almost failures in my career up to the point I got to Brooks. So I had conviction about having a unique and distinctive point of view and strategy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I found the quote now. He said, "Every industry develops conventional wisdom, and there is peril in falling in line with it." I think that's so important.
The biggest risk is looking like your strongest competitor.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. To do what they're doing is actually riskier than doing something distinctive that you execute really well on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. That was the other fantastic piece of your growing manifesto, and you introduced this early on, and then this continues to grow over the course of your experiences and with Brooks, is that vision without execution is hallucination. That's fabulous. I love that so much.
I think in the second business I ran was O'Brien Water Sports, wakeboards, waters, everything you can do behind a boat. A nice global brand that led its category, but it's a small industry.
Yeah.
And we had this strategy and vision to position the brand in a certain way, and we were executing hard on innovation and or building innovation. But a friend of mine basically said, Jim, the vision's great. The vision's really good. But if we don't put a full execution plan together, you're kind of hallucinating. I never forgot it. And it's a truth, I think, Shannon, right? It's all about execution today.
Yes.
The whiteboard strategies that are elegant are fun to look at and be a part of. It's
Sure.
all about execution.
Right. Right. Well, that's where I was going to say the rubber hits the road, and that might be appropriate actually for Brooks, isn't it?
Yep,
That's right.
absolutely.
Well, the other piece that develops as you spend more time and you're starting to build the company back is this idea of culture. And I thought it was great that one of your distributors, Roadrunner Sports, is the one that says, "Don't mess up the culture." Brooks has got a
Yep.
great culture when you come in. Talk about that as something that you started to understand more and more as a really critical part of what success looks like.
I think as you go into an organization, you visit a company, whatever it might be. One of the things we used to walk out with, and Dan Sheridan, the current CEO at Brooks, my successor, and I used to talk about this. If you get done with a meeting with this customer or building, whoever it is, would you buy their stock? And connected to that, Shannon, is kind of the customer in the building. Are they customer focused, right?
Sure.
And we've been in companies where they kind of wouldn't know if a customer was standing right next to them. So that obsession with the customer, I just think is foundational to everything. At Brooks, because their product in the 90s was not top tier, their
Right.
technology wasn't leading. They were trying to do so many things for so many people. Their product was really struggling to sort of break through.
Yeah.
But what they had was they would do anything to service a retailer.
Yeah.
They leaned in, solved problems, tried to never say no, and had this intensity of customer focus. It was there when I got there. The other thing they had was they sort of branded the work hard, play hard. You run hard, and then you have a beer with your friends afterwards and celebrate. They had that mantra inside the building. They all worked hard and tried to hustle for the customer. And so they branded that culture. A local Seattle agency came up with this of Run Happy.
Right.
And it was sort of branding Brooks' culture. And obviously, it was the first brand positioning and run that kind of transcended the sport, right? Track and field, cross country, the competitive sport is so powerful, maybe the original sport ever. But what running is so unique of, it transcends that. And
Yes.
it becomes an investment in yourself, health, wellness, mental clarity. So Brooks was the first brand that sort of elevated up from the sport and valued and celebrated you and your run. That was the core of Run Happy. So, I think that the core of the culture is this customer obsession.
Yes.
And problem solving. And that I just think it's essential for any consumer brand.
Sure.
Because if you're not obsessing, somebody else is, and you're exposed to being disrupted. So I think that's the core of what Brooks had in 2000, and I think it still has it, and they're competing with it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's excellent. I love that Run Happy, and the story that I had heard this story before, and it was fun to read it in your book, and I'd love you to share it, is when you first were positioning this against some of the bigger retailers, and you show up at the Olympic team trials for track and field at University of Oregon in Eugene. Will you tell that story? It's sort of spectacular.
So what's interesting is, the sport is the soul of
Yeah.
the entire industry globally, right? And it's never been stronger. And it's not just track and field, but it's road racing, marathons, it's trail, it's ultra. Running has just got so many fantastic elements of the sport. But the Olympic trials come by every 4 years, and the marathon is on a road course somewhere around the world. But the trials are almost always at Eugene.
Yeah.
And USA Track and Field obviously runs it all, which has a 27-year relationship with Nike. So Nike is the sponsor for USA Track and Field. They spend a lot of money on it, but all the brands invest in the sport. All the brands invest in athletes. So all the brands come to Eugene. And we host retailers, we host our VIPs, we spend several days there, we watch all the competition. We have morning runs, and we have 300 or 400 people on our morning runs that we go out, and then we watch the competition. It's incredible. And of
Yeah.
course, we have athletes there, but we decided, what can we do? Okay, we're going to have a house and have guests and our morning runs. But we checked with the FAA and no one was restricting air rights. So we wanted to fly a run happy banner, around the trials for the 3 days that everyone was there to cheer on the athletes. And it's
Right.
our athletes run happy, but this is an incredible sport. Well, they didn't like that. And by they, I mean the USATF officials and Nike. And they asked us not to fly it, but we checked with the FAA, we checked with some other folks, and there was nothing prohibiting. We're just cheering on athletes. We're not investing as much as some brands are, but we're investing. The sport is the soul of everything that we all do. So, they told us not to fly it, and we checked it out, and we flew it, and they said, look, we told you not to fly it. You guys all need to leave. And we had 50, 60 guests there, retailers basically, in the running industry. And we said, why? And they said, well, the ticket ends up being a license to attend that they can revoke at any time because we bought our tickets free. So they kicked me and our head of sales and marketing and our head of sports marketing out. They kicked us out of the trials. And we went out to the tent and had a beer and just kept flying the plane overhead. It was a bizarre event because it kind of became legendary within the industry
Yeah.
that we were kicked out for that. But it was a classic Brooks, David and Goliath. I mean, we
Yes.
just tried. All of our marketing was sort of in real life around events and with runners and all of that. We had a great grassroots program. This was a continuation of that. So yeah, it did become quite a story because they decided to kick us out, which was, I think, a mistake, but that's what they did.
Well, before we get to there's a real heyday coming up here in the story of Brooks. But before we get to that, at this stage of development, when you've taken over when things were really, really tenuous, and then you've made this focused choice to really let go of a lot of the parts of the brand, and you're moving forward. Are there places in there where you were worried that something might not work, or were you completely confident the entire time? What was
You
that?
know, I think that from the outside, we took significant risks.
Yeah.
We did, right? And there's some things that, when I think of the biggest decisions, I think the decision to go run only was the only one we really had because we had some good products there and we had to make the adrenaline work and then we had to make the ghost work, a neutral everyday trainer. And ultimately we have a full line of fantastic performance running products from the trail to the marathon. But I think along the way, when you hit a wall, and we hit several walls, the 2008, 9, 10 global recession, the barefoot phenomenon, basically
Right.
undermined performance footwear. Those were sort of existential moments that we had to navigate and get through. And I think in each case we did. But when you're sitting there with all the ambiguity, there's no answers. You have to do your homework and pick a path. And
Yes.
we did. And I think the thing that I felt strong about is when we did take a path and we had conviction about it because we did our homework on it, we
Sure.
went bold. We
Yeah.
announced to the world, in 2009, when the recession was just roaring and the barefoot thing was crazy, we came out and we said, look, we think that Run Happy, a brand positioning with Run Happy and performance product is a $1 billion idea. And we're going to be the next $1 billion brand and run. We were about 180 million in revenue when we said that. And I believed it. I think I believed, but that was an aspiration, of course.
Sure.
And we ended up filling that out. And then I think in 15 and 16, when millennials were evolving, household income was less, they were doing lots of things, they weren't buying as much gear. We also planted our flag on performance as timeless. And
Yeah.
it was very lonely, Shannon. I mean, because it's not what everyone else was doing. But
Yes.
as a challenger brand, we knew that's what we did well. And
Sure.
so even if it was going to be a smaller market, we were going to try, our best to get our share of it. So I think those moments are hard
Yes.
because there's no answers, right?
Yes.
There's no answer. But I think because, we were able to focus on this fantastic running and walking and trail, population that's moving.
Sure.
We were able to focus on them. We had a lot of confidence that there was a market there.
Yeah.
We just had to, make sure we were executing at a level where we could get our share of it.
And still you described your first announcement of this $1 billion goal, and
Yeah.
you say the room went quiet.
Well, we were
Easy
doing
thing, right?
it was an interesting time, right? We went from that year, we went on to triple the business in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So the opportunity was there. So the Great Recession, this was stunning to me. It was global, right? And I remember in Spain and Italy, the unemployment with the population 30 and under was 50%.
Wow.
And yet running shoes were growing. Running was growing. Right. So it kind of made the cut in the recession as something that people were going to invest. They're going to invest in a pair of shoes and they're going to buy.
Yeah.
So we had conviction that this market was going to be there. Right. And by being bold like that, what we did, we market signaled, right? And I learned this from Warren Buffett and reading his letters in the 80s. We were just sending a big old market signal that Brooks equals running.
Yes.
This is who we are. This is what we're all about. We're going to work incredibly hard to bring exciting, innovative performance products to market. But this is who we are, and we're going to stay focused on it. So, I think all of that was at play. But when I went, we did this media tour, again, positioning Brooks. Here's how we see the world. Here's how we're going to grow. And when I came back to Seattle, people were kind of shocked by the headline. Brooks says they're going to be the next billion-dollar brand. But it's kind of what we were working on. It was just a 10-year look at it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Audacity is important. That's the phase 3 of the grit factor. You've got to be willing to be audacious. That's right. That's terrific. Well,
I would agree.
The acquisition of Brooks into Berkshire Hathaway, and then not just the acquisition itself, but then cutting Brooks out as its own independent company was pretty unprecedented. Yes.
As Warren tells the story, it was completely unprecedented. I don't think he'd ever done it before. And I didn't expect it. A lot of people ask me, how did that happen? How did that happen? And obviously it was Warren's idea. But we had 4 owners at Brooks, right? We had private equity and Russell Athletic and Fruit of the Loom and then Berkshire Hathaway.
Sure.
And each time, and this is, Brooks was the 4th company I was president of. Yeah. And so I was determined to really stay for the long haul and build a brand, build a great business.
Yes.
And so we treated all of our owners as investors.
Sure.
We took responsibility. Okay, it's up to us. We have to see the opportunity for this business. We have got to have a vision for where it can go and be able to articulate that. And so because we were able to do that, we sort of negotiated also our independence and our ability to just keep playing this game and growing. And you have to deliver results, of course, but we've been doing that. So under Fruit of the Loom, as I mentioned, that in 2009 and 10, we put that bold BHAG out there of $1 billion. Yeah. We were tripling the business between then and 2014. And so we had nice growth going and we were always profitable. We had strong returns on capital, which I knew Berkshire would appreciate, even though we were a smaller business in their portfolio.
Sure.
So, within Fruit of the Loom, we were kind of doing our thing. And Warren would always send notes and great job. He reads everything on every business in Berkshire every month. He's just not passive. He is paying attention. You might never hear anything, but he's reading everything. Sure. And he was kind of following our success and wrote me a note. Great job. You guys are doing well. If you're ever in Omaha, come by. We'll have a steak. I'd love to learn more. So I just happened to be in Omaha 2 weeks later, Shannon. And that really began. I wanted him to fall in love with Brooks. I kind of knew he would because of the dynamics of the business. And we weren't trying to be anybody else. We were trying to build a unique, distinctive brand in this fabulous category that could be a great business. I think it's been such a great thing for Brooks. It's been a wonderful platform to take a long view and to continue to build the brand in a great category. So good outcome for Brooks.
No, that's fantastic. We'll come back to it for sure because I know you've learned so much in that journey also. But one of the things that you said early on is that you'd come across this quote by Benjamin Disraeli that the secret to success is constancy of purpose. I think you
Mhm.
still have it on your desk. Is that right? That's
I
fine.
do. I do. I have it.
Yeah.
I don't have my whiteboard in my home office, but it's on my computer.
That's
So
excellent. No, it's excellent. Well, I want to talk a little bit about purpose and how your understanding of that evolved
yeah,
at Brooks. Maybe continued to evolve as you started to do more
yeah.
work with Buffett and Munger as well, and how that understanding continues to evolve even today. If you've been asking yourself, what's the point of all of this? Not just in your job, but in your life, you're not alone. Most high achievers I work with aren't lacking drive. They're lacking direction that actually matters. That's why I built Leading with Purpose at the Grit Institute. It's a step-by-step path to reconnect with what drives you, leads you, and sustains you, especially when things get hard. If you're tired of just checking boxes and you're ready to lead with intention, go to thegritinstitute.com/purpose/ and start Leading with Purpose today.
Yeah, I think, in my career, as I started to, look at different businesses and their sort of trajectory and success and failures and what great businesses looked like, and especially brands that were great businesses that kind of led their space and were hard to compete with. I saw Pillsbury had over 30 businesses,
Yeah.
and they each had a story, and some of them were not good.
Sure.
And then, I got into running these small divisions of the Coleman Company and, O'Brien Water Sports, and then a snowboard company, Sim Sports. And then each time we turned it around, we got it positioned, we had some success going, and it got sold.
Yeah.
They were all sold. I didn't stay with them. So by the time I got to Brooks, we had a private equity owner. They were going to have to sell at one point. But I put that quote, the secret to success is constancy and purpose, on my whiteboard first. Keep me focused because I wanted to play through this next ownership round. I wanted to be part of a team that built a brand. At that time in my life, I wanted to build something because that's just so much more fun.
Sure.
I wanted to be part of a team and build that culture and build that team because I believed that great brands are built over maybe decades.
Yeah.
If you change who you are every 3 years, the customer's never going to be able to figure you out.
Right.
They're never going to be able to stay with you.
Sure.
And so I had that quote on my wall, and I started to articulate to the team at Brooks, as you're going to get bored of me articulating this run focus and how we're going to build in the space, because we're going to be doing it for many, many years to come.
Sure.
And so it was really first, putting that on my board to remind me not to chase shiny things, to stay focused and stay in. And because it's what I really wanted to do. And obviously it worked out. I feel so fortunate, Shannon, because I've always wanted to build a brand.
Yeah.
And we had a chance to do that at Brooks.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about purpose, maybe more broadly, even, and I feel like you certainly address this. And you discuss this with Warren about how it is that what it is that you're doing is making people's lives better, right? How do you start to think about purpose? There's run happy is great, but the purpose of what it is that the brand is doing that is, and I'm going to put words in your mouth here, so please feel free to argue with them, but making the world a better place. How do you think of that connection to something that's beyond the company, beyond yourself, and how, or was that important in driving that work?
I think what we've all been in these meetings around a conference table of what's our mission, what's our vision, what's our purpose.
Sure.
And you end up getting in these fun conversations of what's the difference between a mission, a vision, or a purpose. And we have big debates over that. And I smile because those are not the most important elements of this. Yeah. Where I anchored in on purpose, and the key was it's sort of a conviction with action attached to it, pointed at other people, not just kind of yourself. Pointed at other people, and it doesn't change. And so for Brooks, it's evolved a little bit, but to inspire everyone to run and be active. Sure. So the power of that is, it's not a mission is is sort of a campaign. It has goals attached to it and
Yes.
has a finish line, right? It has a
Sure.
deadline. Mission is the campaign. We have one at Brooks. A vision is sort of a dream, right? It's an aspiration and a dream. But purpose is different in the sense that, it's the only thing we put on the wall in the foyer because it would never
Yeah.
change.
Sure. Yeah.
We were going to stay focused on inspiring everyone to run and be active. And the
Yes.
key to it, Shannon, I think it's focused on other people.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not focused on yourself.
Yes.
That your role in this world is to make an impact on others. So you never get there.
Yes.
It's always active. And the
Yes.
word inspire for Brooks was incredibly powerful because that's a really high bar.
Yes.
If the way you carry yourselves as an organization, as a brand, it actually inspires someone to move. That's a high level. So I think for all those reasons, it became sort of a timeless North Star.
Yes.
That people, this is who Brooks is. This is where it's going. This is what it aspires to do day in, day out. That's where the power of it was.
Sure.
And it does help you decide what you're not going to do.
Right.
But I think that everything else falls within it. And we have strategies, we have missions, we even have vision, and they become sort of campaigns, but they're all underneath that purpose. So I think that's the power of it, because if companies and organizations and enterprises are not people.
Yes.
But I think great brands have all the dimensions and characteristics of an interesting person.
Sure.
They have values, they have philosophies, they have sensibilities, they have, goals and purpose. So I think you can't pretend that a company is going to be a person, but if you execute that consistently over time, people come to trust it. People come maybe to have affinity for it because it reflects who they are and what's important to them in their life as a runner.
Yes.
And so I think that's where I found, the best brands. What does it mean to be authentic as a person? What does it mean to be authentic as a brand? And so, for all those reasons, I think purpose can be really powerful, but you have to be pretty convicted to it. It can't, if it changes every 3 to 5 years, the customer is going to be, you're going to have to start over sort of with the customer.
Right. Oh, there's about 10 directions I'd love to pursue this. One of them is to back up towards the beginning of your book. You talk about how one of the things that Brooks did and started to do was to really develop leaders. And as you develop the individual leader, which is different than the company purpose, right? The individual leader's purpose is different than the company purpose. How do you think about developing the leader's purpose and then helping to connect it to that organizational purpose?
I've never answered that specific question, but here's, we've done at Brooks for years and years and years, onboarding programs, and they see 20 leaders in the company over 3 days. We spend a full 3 days on onboarding for every new employee, and we all speak. And so when I ever spoke to new employees, here was my dream for them, is that they're going to come into this culture and they're going to add something to it. Yeah. You can't be successful by trying to lead or manage or interact like somebody else. You gotta do it from your own self. That's how you're going to be authentic. But you can build skills around that. So, my hope for everyone coming into the company is that they could bring their best self, not their whole, but their best self, to add something to this culture. And what that really means is they're adding something to their peers and their teammates, right? Whether the people that they're leading or the people that they're working side by side with. So I think that's what it is. That's always been my hope, is every company has a culture. They need it, and so it's not as they say, a democracy, but I think in a generative, healthy, team-based culture, you want people that can obviously sink in with, your purpose and all the things you're trying to do and the way you're trying to do it, your how is specific, right? That's really what we're teaching and engaging with leaders on, is let's have a shared how here, because morale is 60-70% their manager. Sure. So if we're going to have a healthy culture, and a culture is behaviors in action, as leaders, we're going to have to behave consistently with the values that we say we have. Yes. Otherwise, it's just words on a page. Sure. Culture is behaviors in action. And
Yes.
so we spent so much time as, okay, start with you. You have to be authentic to you as a person. You lead and interact with people in a way that's consistent with the values that we say we have in this culture. We can grow with it. And that knowledge and sort of reality is where it all started, I would say, Shannon.
Sure.
But we're really trying to lead and manage at a human to human level. And that's where you've got to meet people with where they are. And then, I think you kind of have to decide you want to be part of the team. I
Sure.
think the people that have not been successful at Brooks, haven't really wanted to be part of a team like that. So that's okay.
Sure.
But there's plenty of people that do, and I think that's what we've tried to nurture at Brooks, because a culture is behaviors and action, right? And it's the attitude. What's the Brooks culture today? Is how people feel about it in their mind today.
Yes.
And that's basically of their experience interacting with people inside the company today.
What are,
So
what
yeah.
are some of the tactics that you use to ensure that you were staying connected to those values and to that purpose?
So, we had one of the things we use as a brand is net promoter score, right? How many people are promoting the brand versus, degrading or not saying good things about the brand, or neutral. And Brooks has had some of the highest net promoter scores every year with both runners and retailers. It's the currency, right? It's that trust and loyalty and credibility. Would you recommend Brooks to a friend?
Yes.
So this was in the early last decade. We said, okay, if that works for customers, how about for employees? So we did net promoter score with employees. Would you recommend working at Brooks to a friend?
Yeah.
And what we found, Shannon, was it was kind of a duh, is that when the company was doing well and opportunities were clear, net promoter scores were really high. When the company was struggling, and this was 2015 and 16, and the outlook wasn't clear and we weren't growing, net promoter score dropped. Yeah. And what was interesting about it is we were spending an immense amount of time on the culture, on our behaviors, on employee engagement. And we sort of all knew our culture score should be stronger. And so we basically said NPS isn't getting at the behaviors that really mirror the values that we say we want to, sort of define what the Brooks culture is all about. So we put in a 36 question questionnaire for the culture every summer. And it was all questions around areas of activity, really mostly focused on how leaders are leading, that were behaviors related to the values that we had. And so we got a culture score that was based on our actual behavior and attitudes and what was in the business right now, not just forward looking, because what I'm proud of at Brooks is every time we got into trouble, we tried to navigate and find our way out. But we built culture when we were struggling, whether it was COVID or this decline in the run category in 15 and 16. We actually got stronger as a company during those times. So I think we got really granular about the behaviors that, especially as leaders, that reflected the values that we said we wanted to mirror.
Sure. Yeah. That's and then would that be something that you focused on in separate meetings or in every meeting that you
Yep.
had, or?
So we ended up creating a training program. The Katie Carlson, the whole HR team, architected this whole thing with some help from the outside, but we've ended up bringing it in, called Brooks Connect. Okay. And it was basically a management and leader skill set of basic management and leadership skills every people manager went through. And it was 5 full days of training. Wow. Spread out over 3 months. And so I was there sitting next to a manager first year that just started managing people 6 months ago. We all went through it. And it was just a way of communicating with people and having difficult conversations, of avoiding triangulation, of creating trust, taking responsibility for morale, taking responsibility for people's success, giving them the tools, helping them through it. It wasn't rocket science. It was a lot of work. But I think what we said was, hey, leadership's never been harder in these fast moving times and everything that's going on in the culture and all the disruption out there. So what does a leader have to do today? A, they have to lead strategy for their team and their group, and then across functions as they interact with people in the organization. Two, they have to lead the business plan. They've got goals and their team's responsible for that they got to deliver on for the broader team and for their own department in what they're doing for the next year. And then the third thing is for the manager, they're responsible for morale. They're responsible for recruiting and retaining talent. They're responsible for developing their people and their careers and what they want to do going forward. Point being, these jobs have never been harder, Shannon. These are hard jobs. But I think what we basically, just acknowledged all of that. But our job, great leadership at a function, all the way on up through the C-suite and the enterprise, is leading strategy, leading the business, and leading the people. And you have to do all three. So we just added tools for that third piece to do it at a high level and to do it well.
Sure. Oh, that's excellent. It's really taking responsibility and taking that action so that it is not just hallucination. Yeah.
Well, and it's because it's so interesting because execution is all through the people.
Sure.
I think so many people look at these businesses as the brands are assets and it's a logo and there's products and the products are winning their space.
Yes.
Everything comes from people.
That's right.
And in many of these categories that are competitive, you have to continue to evolve to stay healthy as an org. And so people are behind every moment of execution.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Taking care of people is the key to everything. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, towards the end of your time at Brooks, but not at the end, you had some really scary news for yourself personally. Can you share a little bit about your journey with cancer? That was
I joined the cancer club, as I say, and I smile when I say that. I think we all know, we've all had experiences with cancer. We have family members that have had experience with cancers, friends and like. So I never expected to join that club, but I think it was in 2017 or 18. 6 years ago or so, I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't running well. I had a bad 10K race and I just wasn't feeling well at all. It's something in the digestive area. And was it an ulcer? Wasn't what it was. But I finally got into a doc that I could have a scope, and I had a tumor in my esophagus, esophageal cancer. I was going to need radiation, chemo, and a great surgeon. And that's just a shocking moment, right? I mean, it sort of brings life into focus really fast. And I share the journey in my book because I think everybody's different, Shannon. I mean, how you react to these things and how you approach them, I think everybody's different. For me, I was super anxious because I didn't have a plan. I needed a plan. I didn't, you go right to the web, which I do every time, a friend, has a cancer diagnosis. I go to the web and try to do the research, and they always have survival rates. And the one I found for mine was 1 in 5 years. The 5-year survival rate for cancers are the common ones. So 1 in 5, and obviously there are variations on a theme as it relates to your unique situation, but that was what I saw. And so it got real fast for our family and my wife and my 3 boys. We had 4 grandchildren. And I was grateful in a sense. I had a bit of a calm. I had to get a plan, but I'm so grateful for the life I've had. I love being a CEO. I love being a spouse to Mary Ellen. I loved being a dad of our boys and then grandchildren. Oh my gosh, I felt so lucky. But do you have a lot to lose? You have a ton to lose. I just never wanted to wake up every day and have fear on what I was going to lose. I did not want to live that way.
Yeah.
And yet, all I had to do is look at my family's faces and wow, I had to do everything I could to fight this because I want to be around. Yes. So, I think once I got a plan, I was kind of settled and really working that plan and getting through cancer and getting healthy. And there were some complications that were even almost worse. But, I think in the first reaction, everybody's different. And friends looking at your faces, oh my God, you okay? But I just couldn't wake up every day and think about what I had to lose. I wanted to be in the moment every day. And so I learned a lot, but as you know, grit required. Not fun. I wouldn't recommend it.
Sure.
Treatments and surgeries and all that. But I feel so fortunate. 6 years later, cancer's gone, which is great.
That's amazing. You mentioned that you took inspiration from one of my favorite people and favorite books from Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes. I think in my 40s, I had a couple moments that were, we're all sort of creatures of our experience, right? And your life experiences are, end up getting into your DNA and who you are. And
Right.
I'm pretty hardwired in a lot of ways, but I kind of lifted my head up at age 40. And I had been so focused on, being a CEO, being a dad, being fit, running, and all of that. Those are my three things. My hobby was running, and I'd still play a little hockey. But we had a couple things that I was involved in. One was a speech in YPO on happiness, and that the purpose of life is happiness. And so that's interesting. I actually never thought about that, Shannon. I was so focused in my work. And then a couple years later, I think my wife gave me the Viktor Frankl book, and what struck me is that not exactly the purpose of life, the meaning of life, is engaging with other people in the moment and the experiences you have with other people on the journey, because you're not always going to be into a mode when you're experiencing adversity. And being in a concentration camp as Jew in the 40s was adversity, to say the least.
Sure.
Whether it's cancer, whether it's a challenge in life, a challenge in business, happiness is hard to keep front and center today is the goal. But purpose, purpose of connecting with others and appreciating the journey, enjoying the journey, being present on the journey. That's where all of life is. One of the great ads in running was done by Nike in the 80s. There is no finish line. And everybody that's ever run as an investment in themselves got that ad, right? But in life, I think if you approach it, the finish line's, kind of the end. So in life, if you approach it as, it's about these moments that you have every day. That's where life is.
Sure.
And I think that Viktor Frankl book for me, just being present every day, that's where life is. That's the mode to be in. So yeah, that was a powerful book for me, especially at the time I read it. It's a great book.
Well, two last questions for you. I wish we had hours because you could pull all of these apart, and I know there's so much wisdom in everything it is that you've experienced and that you've shared. But if you went back to the time that you were graduating from college, what would you tell yourself now that you didn't know then?
That's always a great question. I've learned so much on the journey. I mean, there's so much I didn't know back then, but I think it would be this conversation that we just had. The fact that I was in my 40s to really understand that, Shannon, I kind of missed a lot of life with my head down.
Yeah.
I thought, being a CEO early in life was having a strategy and solving the puzzle and looking down the road and long-term thinking and all of that. It wasn't focused first and foremost on the people. And I think I would have been better had I had that engagement to others and beginning to really build relationships more broadly, outside of my family. If I'd have known the power of that at age 20, I would have gone faster for sure.
Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. And this may be a very related question, but perhaps not. At this point, with all of the experiences that you've had, how would you say that you would define success today?
Oh boy, that's also a question I don't think I've ever answered. I think that I've always wanted to be good at something. I wanted to master something. I wanted to be really good at something. And so for me, that was leadership. I've worked really hard to build a toolkit that would allow me to be an effective leader at an enterprise level, a business level. And so I think mastering something, it might be a hobby, but I just got great satisfaction out of that. It's hard.
Yes.
The whole point of that is that you're not trying to do something easy. You're actually trying to do something that's hard. But
Right.
if you can master it, there's so much gratification in that, I think. And then
Right.
obviously if it's externally oriented, it has a good impact on other people. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of meaning and purpose in that for me. But and then family, my gosh, I was working with a friend once who had been married and they were trying to decide whether to have kids, and I don't know. There's nothing like being a parent. There's
Yes.
no experience in life like being a parent. And there's just so much gratification in that now with grandchildren. So I think having a partner in life, and I'm super lucky to have had Mary Ellen through thick and thin, and the thin was cancer, and I'm so grateful to have her help me through that. But that's a key part of it, right? And then there's got to be joy somewhere, and for
Yeah.
me, people used to ask me, okay, there's work, there's family, what's your hobby? And for me, it was running, it was fitness, it was activity. It's just
Yes.
how it made you feel, right? And for me, it was stress relief. It was almost meditation, Shannon.
Sure.
So I think, success to me is finding that recipe
Yes.
for you. It's a recipe, right? We all have the same ingredients. It's the recipe you create for you that feeds you and balances you and keeps you healthy,
Yes.
and hopefully gives you opportunities for creative output and impact for
Yeah.
people. Anyway,
I love that. That's
yeah.
fantastic. Wisdom that's been very well earned and hard earned at times. So thank you so much, truly, for sharing your time and your energy and your joy. You really do. You radiate that joy. I think you found it.
Well, thanks, Shannon. This is fun. I always like to talk about the leadership puzzle, and I appreciate you having me today. It was great to chat.
Well, likewise. Thank you, Jim. What a gift to have Jim Weber with us today. His leadership journey, transforming Brooks Running into a purpose-driven powerhouse and redefining what it means to lead with integrity and vision, is a masterclass in clarity, grit, and long game thinking. And then in the midst of that success, to face a life-changing cancer diagnosis and to keep leading with even greater focus and resolve, that's the kind of courage and resilience that stays with you. Jim's willingness to share not just the wins, but the inner work behind the leadership, that's what makes this conversation so meaningful to me, and I hope to you as well. If you'd like to go deeper, I highly recommend his book, Running with Purpose. It's part memoir, part business strategy, and all heart. You can find it at this link, tinyurl.com/runpurpose. I'm deeply grateful to Jim personally, not just for this conversation, but for the example that he sets, leading with purpose, grounded in values, and always moving forward. Until next time, keep going with grit, with purpose, and never alone. If you have a moment, please make sure that you've subscribed, forward this to a friend, and drop in a review. It makes a big difference to the success of the show and helps others find it.